So I probably don't need to say much more. That was a wonderful intro. Thank you so much, Amanda. A lot of that is going to be on this slide, including Joni, upside down Joni. I think the only things I want to say on this slide is A, follow my cat on Instagram, and B, it's very cool to be here because I'm local. I live in Brooklyn, moved here 3 years ago, very exciting. And so today I want to talk to you about, kind of alluded to when we were listing off the companies that I've worked for, following your heart and sort of embracing your own values when it comes to the job search and sort of continuing, like checking in on those values as you're working at a job, in DevRel specifically. I do think actually, now that I think about it, a lot of this can apply to any job, but my experience lies in DevRel, so that's what I'm going to be talking about. So when we talk about these values, like what I want to share is that I've hopped around so much that I've kind of gotten to a point where I'm very clear on what works for me in a job, and I'm hopeful that some of the things I'm going to share today will be useful for you as well. So the things I'm going to talk about today are kind of figuring out what those values are for you and how you can make those choices and navigate them. Applying them to things like networking. This conference today is a great example. Applying them to being able to more clearly spot the red flags that pop up either in your interviewing process or while you're at your job. And then those red flags can also help you avoid burnout. If you're aware of what the red flags are, hopefully they're going to take you to a place where you're not necessarily going to get yourself to the mode of burnout. Unfortunately, I myself have burned out many times, so I have many stories to tell about it. And then, I know this is sort of this weird existential time that we're in DevRel. There's been a lot of layoffs, a lot of anxiety for us. Let's just talk about some of the basics of how to be prepared for that. And I know Shai, who's in the back, is doing a talk about that right after this. And so I won't talk too much about it because we have someone doing a great talk about that. So all of that's going to sort of come together and talk about how you can, use your own personal values to pursue a career that's really aligned with your heart. So when we talk about defining and honoring your personal values, so I refer to myself as the Goldilocks of DevRel. Literally no one else calls me that. That's just something I've decided that it's just not like a thing. It's just what I've decided. And the only reason I call myself that is because I think my last, 5-6 years have been largely at developer plus companies like MailChimp, like Shopify, where the developer is not the sort of end customer. The developer is adding value ultimately for the customer. And specifically, these have been at SaaS companies that are focusing on small to medium businesses. I always forget to breathe when I'm doing these. Hold on a second. Should I breathe? Okay. All right. So the way I like to look at it, I don't know if any of you are familiar with a podcast called The Community Pulse. Back in the day, there was a moment where I was one of the hosts of that podcast. We did a really cool episode back in 2020, all about navigating ethics in DevRel. And it was at a time when there were questions starting to emerge around some of the, ethical questions that come up when you're doing DevRel. I think at the time there was questions around, some of these bigger contracts that companies are taking with weapons manufacturers, things like that, things that are kind of tough things to navigate. It turned into a really interesting conversation about how we, can sort of check our own compasses internally to make sure that the work we're doing is aligned with, what's most important to us and how we can make sure that the projects that we lead and the companies that we, give our talent to, and there's so much. Yeah, I'm going to just take advantage of that right now. All right, breathing and hydration are really important. That's a big takeaway from this talk. So as I was saying, that talk resulted in me kind of thinking about, well, how can we actively make sure that I'm aware of what my core values are, what my sort of code of ethics is, and use that to navigate how I'm, looking at opportunities and looking at the work that I'm doing every day. I definitely suggest, I'll send you a link to that after this, but it was a great episode. And so why I say the Goldilocks of DevRel is because I've hopped around and then I came back to a place that felt just right. And that's HubSpot. It's DevRel team. For the time being, we're in a place right now where I feel like the project I'm working, this is actually probably the first year in my career where I feel like the work I'm doing is truly aligned with my personal values. In my work or my exercise of identifying those, I started just by writing down like what makes me happy, what's exciting to me. And for me, it came down to connection with folks, facilitating that connection. It came down to having fun, making sure I'm able to laugh every day with people I work with. And then it came down to equity. And equity in all kinds of different things. When it comes to DevRel, I think we're doing a lot of work, especially when it comes to developer plus work. We're working with platforms and ecosystems where there's guidelines, there's things that we're asking developers to do, and we need to make sure that those guidelines are equitable and give everyone an opportunity to be successful on that platform. And that comes down to the work that I do every day. We just launched a developer mentorship program this week at HubSpot, and it's all about elevating folks who may not have the access to some of the barriers to entry, because HubSpot, I don't know if anyone here has ever tried building anything on HubSpot. It's kind of hard and complicated, and we're very aware of that. And there's so many different things and ways you can build on the platform. And even if you have a very specific task, it's intimidating. So we've paired folks with folks who've done the hard work of figuring that out themselves to sort of build that level playing field with folks. And so what does that look like for you? What is it that gets you up in the morning, even if it doesn't have anything to do with work? What are your hobbies that motivate you? And how can you look at the core of what is, making you happy about those things and apply it to your sort of list or your rubric of personal values? And then when it comes to, I randomly put pictures of myself in here doing relevant things. So look, I'm networking in Keen.io back in the day. I put my name, put pictures of myself networking, that's everyone I could find. Anyway, so when it comes to your values driving things like networking, I don't know about y'all, but my social battery, especially I don't know if we're post-pandemic, but you know what I mean, is extremely minimal. I get so much energy and inspiration from events like DevRelCon, but I also get extremely exhausted easily after I showed up literally for my talk, and I might hang out after, but it's just, I've also been to many conferences this summer, so that's partially why, but to me, it's really important to use my social battery and apply it to the places where I feel like align most with my values. So I only come to events where, these are my people. Y'all are my people. It's so cool to be able to connect with people who actually understand what we're doing every day. And so I'm not just going to go to a networking event for the sake of going to a networking event. And that aligns with me. But if you are really interested in building out your personal Rolodex, maybe that aligns more with your values and you want to go to a networking event and meet as many people as possible. But just understand that, I don't know, I think we all probably agree that these things can be taxing over time if you do too many of them. So pick and choose what feels right. The only other thing I wanted to add that's here is also I gave myself a challenge to do this talk without any notes at all. And so every time I've done it, it's been kind of different. So anyway, you're getting the gist of it, don't worry. I think one thing I want to say is that I think the vast majority of networking I do is actually online. So if I meet all of y'all, and then we connect on LinkedIn, if we hit it off and I have a great, connection and vibe with you, I'm gonna throw you that heart on LinkedIn when you have an announcement. I'm gonna give you that thumbs up, and it means a lot. When I get that back from people, I know it seems so small, but it's a big deal, and so you're nurturing those connections. So the story I kind of want to tell about this is that you never know when these great connections are gonna kind of be fruitful for you. One example is, I think you were saying that all of your jobs have been through community networking. Yeah, very similar. I don't think I've ever sort of cold applied, maybe back in the day, way a long time ago, but I don't think I've ever cold applied for a DevRel job and had it work out. So the way I got into HubSpot, I left Shopify to try to run my own thing for a while, a consultancy around developer community. And, turns out running a business is hard. Sales are really hard. I have newfound respect for salespeople that I never had before running my own company. So huge shout out to people who are doing their own thing and running consultancies. It's really, really tough work. So I realized it wasn't for me, partially because I also completely ran out of money. I was having a conversation with some folks that some of you might know Tim Falls in this room, and he was telling me how he was talking with someone who was looking to build out their team in HubSpot. It wasn't a fit for him, so he's someone who I feel like is very, very values driven, if you know what I'm talking about. He used to do developer community at SendGrid and just taught me a lot of stuff. We worked together at Keen.io. He basically was like, oh, I mentioned your name. And it turned out the hiring manager and the lead of the DevRel team had met me just a couple times at hackathons. And I remember her too. And it was like just a really lovely connection. It wasn't like this deep thing, but she was like, oh, SJ, I remember her. And obviously I had to interview and get the job, but I don't think I would have had that door open had it not been for that just sort of fortuitous, happy meeting at a hackathon. So you just never know. Okay, there's Joni, peering over my cat's delicatessen bag. And I'm going to talk a little bit about red flags. And the reason I put that picture there is because it represents, that was probably day 2 of living in New York. And I had just ordered my first delivery of cats. So let's see. How do I start this one? So there's so many times where I have ignored red flags. And I like to think that if you're close to your values, then you're closer to being able to recognize those red flags more easily. And they're individual. They're different for everybody. The story I'm going to share is how I left HubSpot the first time to join MailChimp. And I want to sort of give a caveat that I'm by no means disparaging any of these companies. But I'm talking about how this stuff is all so personal and how timing is everything. MailChimp reached out to me at a time when I had moved to Boston for HubSpot. And in my heart of hearts, love Boston. It's a great city, but not a city where I wanted to live. And so I was trying to move to New York. I was trying to figure out a way to move to New York. And it wasn't possible with HubSpot at the time. They have now done an amazing job of becoming remote hybrid friendly. But at the time, it just wasn't an option. And so MailChimp reached out to me, again, one of those LinkedIn in-mails. And normally I hesitate to reply to those, but this one was really cool. They were looking for a developer advocate though, which is typically not my jam at all. I like community because I really liked facilitating connections. I'm not that face of developer advocacy that is standing in front of the room doing talks. So that's ironic I'm doing it now, but I don't usually do this. So I was like, y'all, do you have a DevRel team? And they were like, no. And I'm like, wait a minute. How are you hiring a developer advocate without a DevRel team? And started to ask more and more questions. That opportunity turned into them basically saying, hey, come and build DevRel at MailChimp, essentially. And I'm like, well, that sounds incredible, but wait a minute. How was I so easily able to convince you to build DevRel into the original rules for an individual advocate? So it turned out the timing just wasn't right for me, and I wasn't the right person to come in and build DevRel at that organization. And so I could go into more details about that story, but it was a moment where I ignored the red flags in favor of the silver lining, which was that they relocated me to New York. And the great thing was it did kind of work out. Sometimes these things, there's checks and balances. I had a tough year at MailChimp, but I really am proud of what I was able to achieve. Although it wasn't as much as I could have had I stayed at HubSpot. So, balance all of these things, understand the sacrifices that you're going to make and understand where the company fits in. I think one of the things that's super key is if you're looking into DevRel these days, and this is a good time for my next slide. This one. For those of you who have maybe been in this industry for a little while, you may remember a time where we're all wearing, I think a lot of us still wear many hats, but there was a time when the teams were really small and folks were just doing everything. I remember being at events and developer evangelists not only were they helping developers every weekend at a different hackathon, but they were also building docs at the same time, and they were doing sample apps, and it was just wild, and they burnt out. They all burnt out every dev evangelist. I'm saying that distinctly now because we don't hear that term as much anymore. has burnt out very quickly after that 2 or 3 year period. So I think specialization is starting to really benefit us and allow us to not burn out. And if you go to a company that are kind of asking you to do everything, you're gonna burn out. You're gonna burn out quickly. And it's also a sign that they maybe don't understand what their DevRel strategy is and how it's going to build into the longer term of the company. So the red flag for me is if you're seeing a sort of wear everything, all the hats job, ask more questions and make sure they know how their vision for DevRel aligns with the company strategy. I won't again talk about this too much, but the sort of elephant in the room is this sort of tough, anxious, sort of existential time that we're in DevRel. I should practice what I preach, but the money that I took from Shopify, I sold all my stock and invested it right away into this agency that I tried to build. And I didn't have any more padding after that. I was just like, if this works, great. If it doesn't, I'm in trouble. And, wow, okay, my tooth just one other thing. That was blood. This is not supposed to be stand-up. Basically, what happened was I learned a lot of lessons and was very lucky that HubSpot reached out to me when I did, because I completely ran out of money doing things like building, I don't know why I made a big banner about my company for no reason. I wasn't going to hackathons or anything like that, but I just was so proud of myself that I had an agency. I did do some fun work in the 9 months that I was running that, but it save your money. I didn't have a cushion for what would happen when that didn't work out. I think I don't know what I'm doing for time at all, but some of the other things are, that investing in yourself, but making sure that aligns with, what is important to you. Things like a mentorship program can be, or just even a casual mentor relationship can be valuable for you to sort of keep yourself learning new things, building a strong connection with someone, and isn't as sort of, I guess, labor intensive or as involved with like a full-on course or something like that. And, learning. Everybody says, do it. Here's a picture of me way back in the day with the team that I think helped me realize what was my area of focus, the specialty, which is developer community. And we're doing all the things that are important to me. We're being very silly here, wearing our red hats, because back then we were a team called Developer Outreach. So we called ourselves Devo. And I don't know if anyone in this room is, okay, some of you remember who Devo is. And we got the red hats made for ourselves so we could walk around conferences and be referred to as the Devo team. They're a band that used to wear hats like this in the early 80s. And they sang that song with the good, yeah.
The important thing for the younger people is they like the Rugrats theme.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, the mother's boss did a lot of TV.
Oh, goodness. Well, fun facts aplenty at everything. I love that. And okay. If this is being recorded, I just learned that some members of Devo did the Rugrats theme and other cartoon themes. So it's really important information. So I talked about that the days of the do-it-all advocate are gone. You have to evaluate these opportunities to make sure they align with what you think you can be not only most effective at. Just because you're good at something doesn't necessarily mean you can sustainably do it, but it has to align with, how you're feeling, like your core and your heart to keep you motivated, to keep you, connected with all the things that are going on in your life. All right. I feel like I skipped a slide. Oh, I didn't know. I skipped the story, but recapping, basically, make sure some of the things you can do to learn what your personal values are. It sounds like such a sort of abstract concept, but there's a few things. Writing down what you love to do and getting to the root of what that is. What is the core feeling? What is the core motivator? And there's literally quizzes online to help you do this. I love a good online personality quiz. And if they're not, even a BuzzFeed quiz might be able to tell you, which Harry Potter house you've been into or whatever. I don't want to mention Harry Potter, sorry. But I did one actually last night, and I was like, I should probably add some online resources here. And there's one called personalvalue.es. And they suckered me in big time because I bought the $15 PDF that had all the details after. And it came out to very similar to what I had already talked about, the that desire to focus on things that give me pleasure and fun, that connection and the equity. And that's what came out of the quiz. I was just like, hey, great. So maybe y'all should do that quiz. The networking and, specialization always tied back to those personal values, and it'll keep you kind of grounded and try to help you avoid some of the pitfalls of burnout and save your money. Yeah, that's it. First, Jenny, waving at you all. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was fabulous talk. What questions do we have for Sarah?
It's like, shit, that's for the career, but we hasn't.
So in all of your Goldilocks experience, sometimes you have to figure out when it's time to go. And are there any signals that you think should not there isn't just screaming at the end of the road?
Yeah, this was the story I forgot to tell. Let's go back to this. Thank you. This was my cute little team at Shopify. Shopify was another interesting experience where I joined that team with the developer community title, ostensibly to come in and build out a developer community function. But again, I won't get into all the details, but the timing wasn't quite right. I did want to show impact though, and feel like I was making a difference in the future of their developer platform. So I put together an event series and basically did like a North American tour of the Shopify developer platform the summer of 2017. And I was supported to do this, but I was the one going to each event, managing all the logistics, setting everything up, hosting events. I was bringing in, we had a handful of advocates, but we also had engineers coming to some of the conferences. They would fly in for 2 or 3 events and then leave. I was at all 10. By the end of that, I was like completely dead. I knew that I was at a dead end. The company, for the timing of where it was, they proposed to me, hey, do you want to come work on the events team full time? I'm like, not after that summer. It was just like, no, I don't actually want to double down on this. So for me, that was just the moment where I knew that what I was doing, what was offered to me, was no longer aligned with what I felt like I was good at or that I cared about deeply. So that's one example. Some of the other time, I think you start to feel that disconnect. Sometimes can take a lot longer to sort of be for you to become aware of it. Talk to your colleagues, well, maybe not your colleagues so much, but your therapist, the people you feel safe around if you have a therapist, highly recommend. And make sure that if you're starting to feel something that doesn't feel right with you, explore that. Don't be afraid of it. I think sometimes it can be really scary to feel that. But explore it and take the time you need to, see if what else is out there if there's something that's more aligned. More questions for Sarah?
Great talk. Going back to the slide that you're here on, do you have any advice specifically for folks at DevRel who are those do-it-all advocates on setting boundaries or maybe working with your work to specialize, communicating with that? Because I joined my company very early. We didn't really have a DevRel team. And I've actually really enjoyed being a do-it-all advocate and learning all of these different skills and getting good at all of the things. But how do you, once you're already that person, how do you kind of get out of that place?
That's a great question. And I think I've seen this evolution happen at a few different companies, whether I was at them at the time or I've heard stories of it. And I think that it's really important to have a really solid sense of what the overall sort of mission statement is for the work that you're doing, how it connects to the business. It sounds obvious, but sometimes there's a real disconnect between those things and where the company is actually going. And then from that point, you can be great at a bunch of things, and it depends on your values. Do you want to manage people who are going to start doing those things? Do you have the opportunity at the company? Start looking at how you can delegate some of the things that you love, but you don't deeply love. I mean, maybe you do deeply love all of the things, but I think it's a matter of picking and choosing and trying to make sure what is most aligned with the company and what is most aligned with the sort of long-term future, and then understand, are there the resources to grow out a team and to delegate resources to? And also, I also want to say, like, if you are enjoying doing all the things, enjoy it while you can. Like, but be aware of, like, if, you know, like your fundamentals, like, if you're not sleeping, you're not eating, you're not taking care of yourself, like, you have to, you know, kind of be aware of those things too. And don't let it be too late. Just, like, try to hone in on those signals and, like, listen to them earlier than if you weren't thinking about them. Tyrone. What other questions do we have for Sarah? Oh, we can do this. Hit me up. How negative. Yeah, I'm not as active on, like, Twitter as I used to be, but I just restarted. I'm going to tweet more, but I'm sorry, X. But yeah, I'm definitely, like, on the LinkedIn's. I don't know, where do people go these days? I don't even know where to go online anymore.
Depends on it.
Yeah, HubSpot loves LinkedIn, and we love it. It's wild. Well, how about we get another round of applause for SJ?